Okay, so welcome to today's session of MindCouch, navigating the change. So how to navigate through change. This is episode 6 now of the MindCouch series. Sorry, episode 5, not 6. 1 week ahead there. Episode 5 of the series. So far we've kind of looked at how to stay connected, how to look after your well-being, how to keep yourself motivated and productive. We looked at how to keep a teaming culture as well, and keep yourself in the know and in the loop with everything teaming wise, whether you're in work or on furlough. Last week we had a great session on habits, how to make and break them. And how to, whether personal or professional. And this week, like I said, we're going to look at how do we go through a change process. And I think this is really relevant for this week, because we're launching SuperPay now. We're starting to go into the testing phase. We're looking to sign up 100 customers using our field sales team. There's a lot of changes in the business. You guys have all adapted to a lot of personal changes in the recent weeks as well, and you're going to have to kind of make ongoing changes as well going forward. So I think it's really relevant for us to talk about how do you go through that change process. And then next week's session, we're going to go through the importance of self-awareness. So Chris is going to host us a special session on self-awareness as well. And then we're going to carry them on afterwards. If you guys like them, we'd love to carry them on as well. So if there's anything you'd like to see on here, by all means, do reach out to us and let us know. Pop them in the chat box, whichever, and just let us know how you're getting on. Okay, so today's panelists, we're joined by Divya, Daisy and Kirsty. They're going to be talking to us all things change and what they've done and how they've kind of navigated it. So I just want to hand over to each of them to introduce themselves. So I'm going to ask Divya, if you could just introduce yourself first and tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Divya. I've been working for Payment Sense for 8 years. Throughout different roles, different departments, and now I'm a senior management accountant, which was kind of my end target, let's say, because that's why I studied, that's my background. But yeah, I must say I enjoyed every role at Payment Sense, and I've learned a lot, which is what I'm gonna speak about in this session.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, moving over to Daisy.
Hi everyone, I'm Daisy. I have not been at Payment Sense for 8 years. I'm coming into nearly month 3, so started just as lockdown hit. I'm quality manager. Before I came to Payment Sense, I was at OVO Energy doing the same thing, looking after all things quality and coaching. I started in that classic kind of, I'm going to work in a contact centre for my gap year, and then never left and worked my way through various different roles, all linking back to customer service, and then found my passion, kind of all things quality and coaching. So me.
Brilliant, thank you Daisy. And lastly, if we go over to Kirsty, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm Kirsty. I'm a Treasury Manager at Payment Sense. Weirdly, I've been here 8 months, so not the 8 years like Divya. I joined within the finance team. I've been in Treasury similar to Daisy. I did it as my placement year at university and never left. And that was a good few years ago now. So always been within finance, but had a few career changes within finance. So we'll go through those shortly.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay guys, so as we always do, I want to just start with a bit of context setting and have a look at the topic that we're talking about today before we go into the panel discussion. So I want to start with the change curve. I think I've showed you this in a previous session, but basically what we have to recognize when we go through any kind of change is that emotional piece and how we kind of navigate through change and how we process changes. So there's a really good visual here. This is a diagram of what we call the change curve. And this has been created by a researcher called Kubler-Ross, if you're ever interested in having a look at more of her work. But she kind of said, look, we go through these stages of change and we go through these emotions that are attached to it. And she kind of summarizes it as 4 key stages that we should be aware of. And if we acknowledge these processes and these stages, we will be able to navigate through it a lot better, perhaps a little bit quicker as well, and be able to kind of handle it in a better way. So you can see on that vertical axis, you've got emotions, and then across the bottom there, you've got time. And we have to recognize that emotions and time vary for every single person, okay? It's never gonna look exactly like this and exactly these points in time. Everyone processes it in a very different way. But similarly, that curve will look very similar in the way that it goes. So if we start with that first stage of shock, so you hear about the change, someone's told you something's changing or events happened for you to go into this kind of state of shock where you don't really know at this point how to process it. You've heard about it, you perhaps haven't digested it, it hasn't completely sunk in, but you don't know what to do next. Then you start to go through, you transition through this stage of uncertainty, and that's where your emotions really start to take a dip and a dive, because all the questions start to set in, all the kind of uncertainties around what's going to happen, how am I going to process this, what am I going to do, what support do I have. All of those different questions come into play, and you start to go on a downwards trajectory, and you start to, for some people, it goes through anxiety or depression, or it can be a real kind of difficult time for you and a real low point for people emotionally to go through that, because it's all these unanswered questions, all these things that we don't know about what's going to happen or what it's going to look like when we come out the other end of it. But then there's a point when you hit a turning point. So that's when the curve starts to go up, and you start to realize and recognize, actually, there's some control here, something's happened, there's processes put in place, I personally can deal with it a lot better, I've reframed my mindset, I'm able to actually deal with the change a lot better. And you go through this turning point where your emotions start to go up and you go into a high. And then it starts to become the norm, and you start to move forward with it, and the change then becomes a reality. And it's now happened, and that process is just part of your life. So you can link this to various different situations. One example that we might experience in the workplace could be a team member leaving. So you go through that you're shocked they're leaving, whether it's their choice or not, you're shocked at that initial moment in time, but you don't really think too much of it. Then you go through this kind of uncertainty. Well, what happens to their role, their responsibilities? Am I going to have more workload? Are we going to be spread really thin? You go through this sort of negative mindset, if you like, where you're kind of feeling very low in your emotions. How are we going to cope with this? We need someone to be in place. I'm not able to move my project forward because that person's now left. But then you have a turning point. So whether that's your manager's now communicated what the plan is, how you're going to do it, are you going to get a new person in the team? Has a new person come into the team now? Have they reshaped the teams, reshifted them around, restructured? And you start to go through a turning point. Then it starts to go back to normal because you get into your groove of working and you move forward. Similarly, there's other things in a personal point of view. So you could go through grief, for example. Maybe you've lost a family member or someone in your life, or something bad, you've had a breakup in a relationship. And again, you go through that same curve, but it looks slightly different, and perhaps it's over a longer period of time because it's a lot longer to deal with. But again, you go through those emotions of the shock, the uncertainty, you have your turning point, and then you move forward with it and you embrace it. So you can see how you can apply different scenarios to that curve and how that kind of looks for you guys, and how you can navigate through that and move forward. And there's some key things there on those bullet points around things that we should be conscious of when we think about change and when we go through it. So first of all, always embrace it. If change is happening, it's happening for a reason, and it's unlikely to stop. So just embrace that change is coming and acknowledge where in that change curve you are and how you're feeling about it. Be proactive about it and communicate. So don't always take it on yourself. Talk it through with people in your team or a friend or a family member. Be proactive about it and kind of think about, right, what can I do to get myself out of this, or can I get to moving forward? Face your fears. It's easier said than done, but when you're in that stage of uncertainty in particular, talk it through, ask what it is, seek opportunities in it, because that will help you kind of navigate into that turning point then as well. Be open and flexible to change. I think that's easier said than done, but like I said at the beginning, if change is happening, you've got to embrace it. So be open and flexible with it, and kind of get yourself into this frame of mind that it's going to happen regardless of what my influence is. How can I actually get on board with it? Or if I don't want to get on board with it, how do I make that decision to remove myself from it as well? And how do you kind of remove yourself from that situation? Focus on your self-care. that emotion piece there, where it takes a real dip in your emotions, and it can cause a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, a lot of depression, like I said, things like that. So you need to be conscious of your well-being while you're going through this. If it is a team member leaving, for example, as I used in the example earlier, how can you actually kind of focus on your well-being? So is the workload too much because you've lost a member of the team, right? How can I mitigate that? How can I speak to my manager and talk about how I can kind of manage my workload and feel better about all of this, and ultimately stay positive. Again, I know it's easier said than done, but if change is happening, it's happening for a reason, and we've got to kind of get on board with that. So how do you stay positive throughout that? And that's by doing all of those above things. So that's kind of change and you as a person going through change and the emotions that we feel. And what I also want to look at today is kind of how we navigate change in the workplace as well, and how we go through these change processes. And I'm going to take you through a little model from a guy called John Cotter. Some of you might have heard of this, but he talks about organizational change. So he does a lot of work on this, a lot of studies. And he looks at how organizations can effectively work together, and how he focuses on performance, and then how to kind of navigate change. And he has a really good book, which I've linked at the end of this, called Leading Change. But he says there's 8 steps to embedding a major change in a business, in a workplace. So I'm going to take you just through those and some examples of it, and then we're going to jump into our panel discussion where the girls are going to talk us through kind of their experiences of both personal and workplace change. So the first one is to establish a sense of urgency. So change, if you decide as a business that you want to change, or you decide as a team that you want to change, you need to have your reasons why. So that could be a market analysis, there could have been a crisis that's triggered it to happen, there could be some major opportunity with, I don't know, a technological advancement that's happened. Whatever it is, it creates a sense of urgency for you to change what you're doing. And so forth, we have to kind of establish what is that urgency and make sure we're very clear on what it is that's encouraging us to change, and then talk about it, communicate it to people so people understand, and you take them on this change journey with you so they understand what it is we're addressing here. Then on the second part, you need to, once you've established that urgency, you need to create a guiding coalition. So that's, in short, that's basically a working group of people who are going to navigate this change. So you want a group of people who can work together, who have kind of high influence in the business, or who have the power to lead the change. So we talk a lot about exec buy-in and having the execs on board with things. And a lot of the time you need that kind of buy-in from them to make that change. But there are other examples. So say you're trying to make a change with service, for example, customer services. In order to do that, you'd want some of those agents in there to be part of that guiding coalition and to actually help, like, kind of be the champions almost. We have customer champions in the business. So again, that's part of a guiding coalition because they're a working group of people who kind of we share insights and feedback with, and then they help trickle that down through the business. So you have your ambassadors, your champions in a certain scenario, and you have working groups as well. So people who have the power to lead the change. And address who that is. Always kind of identify, do I need it to be at the exec level? Is it managers that I need to do this? Is it just the agents that are going to be processing the change that I need to do this? And then form that group. Then what you need to do is develop a vision and strategy. So it's all very well knowing what it is you want to change and having a group of people who are going to help you do that. But the next bit you need to establish is the vision. So the what. What is it that you're trying to do? What is it that you're striving for? And then the strategy, which is the how. How are you actually going to do it? What steps are you going to take to implement that change? So once you've done that, make sure you have a vision, you've sat down, you've worked out the what and the how. And then communicate it. Too often we kind of come up with these great ideas, and I'm not just talking about babysitters, I'm talking in general here, but we come up with these ideas of what we want to do and what we want to change, but then we don't ever tell anyone about it. And that's the hardest part, and that's kind of normally the biggest barrier to change and successful change, is people not being part of that journey, like I said. So take them with you every step of the way, but really communicate that change and that vision and what it is that you're trying to achieve here and how you're going to do it. Then you need to empower broad-based action, is what he says. So what he means by that is, how do you actually give them the tools, the processes, the systems, everything they need to actually make the change. So first thing to look at is what's blocking you from making the change. How do we remove those blockers and take those away, make the changes to get rid of those blockers? And look at the team that you have in order to do it. Do you have the right people in order to implement that change? If not, where are you going to get those people and the skill sets that you need to do it? Do you have the systems? Do you have the processes? Do you have the structures in place to do it? So actually enable people to do the change. So don't just talk about it and say, you go out and go and get it. Work out structurally, what do you actually need to do to actually get people to change and actually be able to get to your vision. And then generate the short-term wins. So this is a crucial part, and again, it's one that's often forgotten. We need to be able to talk about the short-term wins as we're going through the change process. So at the beginning, identify what would be the first win. So an example of SuperPay is today they did the first transaction on the PAX terminal using our own software, or last night it was. So that's a short-term win. That's not the ultimate goal. It's not the 12,000 customers we want to have by the end of the year, but it's a short-term win because we've managed to get our first transaction on our own software, and we celebrate that, we communicate that out. So make sure you're clear on that as well. What are the short-term wins as you go towards your vision, and celebrate them and verbalize it and get it out there so people know that that's happening, because again, they then feel the change as you're going through it. Then consolidate the gains and produce more change. So what we mean by that is you need to, at this point, you've got an increased credibility. So at this point through the journey, if you've done all of those steps to get there, people are starting to be on board with the change, but you don't want to lose that momentum. So work out what else do we need to do and keep the changes coming. Don't make one change and leave it forever. If you've got another bit that comes off the back of it, make that change, and the next change, and the next change. While people are in that mentality of change, you'll find that it sticks overall, and culturally the whole business kind of goes with you. Work out at this point as well, again, going back to the talent piece, whether we think, right, do we have everyone that we need in the team, the skill sets for where we are now? We've got this far, we've got all our short-term wins, longer term, we've got our vision in place. Do we have the team that we need in order to do that? And how do we actually go forward with that? And then the final one, which should cement your change and kind of get you there, is to anchor new approaches in the culture. So what we mean by this is where you look at, right, have we got the effective management, the leadership that we need in the business? Are the right behaviours in place, and how do we make sure they're cemented? Do we align policies and processes and performance management and everything to this for this change, and how we've implemented this? And ensure there's a lot of leadership development and succession planning as well throughout the business to carry forward that change as well and keep this going. And it's quite an interesting concept. I mean, this for him, this works every time. He's worked with a lot of big organisations as well, and he takes them through these processes. And you can just sit there and map out these 8 steps and say what you're going to do or whatever, and then just keep revisiting it. But what he also talks about at the end of the book is the fact that actually we're coming into a period now where change perhaps isn't so. We shouldn't talk about change as a verb, as an action that we're doing, because actually we're always going through it. So it almost now becomes the norm. We always have to navigate change. We always have to go through a change process. So actually we're in a position where we just need to make this the norm now. And this is the way that we work and the way that we process things. So that's the brief introduction. That's the context to today's session. So it's looking at kind of personal change processes, and then it's looking at more of the professional and the workplace-based change and how we can navigate that. So on that note, we're going to hand over to our panelists now and go into our discussion. As always, guys, if you do have any questions, by all means, pop them into the chat box for the girls, and at the end of the session, we'll go through those and get those answered for you guys. So I'm going to start the first question as a bit of scene setting, and I'm going to ask Divya to take this one. Can you tell us what the biggest change initiative is that you've been a part of in your career, and tell us some of the things that went well with it and some of the things that didn't go so well with it?
Yeah, thank you, Sheila. Maybe a lot of you know that Payment Sense goes through a lot of changes constantly. And in my 8 years, I have been going through a lot of changes as well with Payment Sense, but I would like to highlight the changes I went through last year, because for me, it's probably the biggest changes in my career with Payment Sense. Mainly because we had planned changes and also unplanned changes going through. So the planned ones were the system changes. So we use Workday. That was one of the biggest changes we had in finance, and actually the whole company, because the whole company was involved, and everyone has to use that system. So that was a planned change where we were trying to migrate from our old system to our new system, Workday. And then as we were trying to get ready for it, I was going through a lot of other changes as well, the team changes. So we had a new CFO, which we never had before. And then I had a new finance director, I had a new financial controller, and basically a whole new team. So it was a lot of changes for me, which I struggled to handle. On one hand, like what went well for me, what went well is that the fact that we changed the system, it was basically for us an opportunity to learn new skills, new processes, and automate it, which made it better for me as a career. And like when you learn new skills, whenever you're going through changes, you always learn new things. And also the fact that we had new people in the team. So when you learn something and you just do it that way, and you carry on doing it the same way, and it works well. But when you meet new people and you have new managers, you have the chance to see their perspective. And that helped me a lot as well, like seeing different perspectives, different things, different ways of doing things. And that helped me change my processes, my way of working as well. So those are the positive things. What didn't go well was the system itself. So when we launched the system, we realized that it wasn't ready. It just wasn't ready. So that's when everyone struggled, not only finance, because it was like the main system that we started using, but also the whole company, because they had to use that system and they didn't even know how to do it. So it involved a lot of manual work, a lot of time to spend to fix things. Like I remember working until late, weekends. And the fact that when you were trained to use the system, but along with the time everyone left and we had new people, so the fact that most of the people in the team didn't know how to use it either, so that's what went wrong. But yeah, that's the changes that I wanted to highlight from last year.
Okay, cool. And just on that note as well, what would be your kind of, this is for you, Divya, still as well, what would be the kind of biggest learnings you took from that then? So the things that did go wrong, what would you now know next time if you were to go through that again?
So things that I learned, one, training is really very important for everyone. When we're going through changes, it's important for us to learn what different outcomes are going to be, to be ready to plan it. Planning is very important, and especially communication. Something I learned while going through the migration is that a lot of departments didn't know how to use the system. And we launched it anyway. So I think training and communication was very important. So yeah, that's and that's something that I want to apply for any other changes that we're going through. Make sure we plan it well, make sure we test it, we test everything, we communicate to every person who's gonna be impacted by this change, and we definitely train everyone to be ready for the change.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it definitely, communication, like we said, is on that model is such a big part of it, isn't it? Okay, good. So moving over to Daisy then. So Daisy, same question for you then. So for a bit of scene setting, what's the biggest change that you've been through in your career, and what went well and what didn't go so well as well?
Thanks, Sheila. So mine, similar to Divya, is linked to system release. So in my previous role, we introduced an entirely new workforce optimization platform into the contact center. Everything was brand new: workforce management, performance management, speech analytics, quality management system, all of it from scratch, which was a huge change for everybody in the contact center, 400 or 500 people who all had to learn new ways of doing things and a new system to use. We were kind of building as we were learning and trying to implement the change at the same time. So one of the things that was really important for us, because there were so many people that were going to be interacting with different parts of the new platform, was to really understand what each department needed. So something that went well for us was taking the time to figure out what each department did, what each team did, how they were going to interact, and therefore what we needed to tailor and focus on for those people. And that was great because it gave us, as a kind of project team, loads of interaction with the front line and getting loads of feedback from people who ultimately would be the end users. So that was really positive, and it helped with that communication piece, and kind of the coalition piece, because we had those people on board to then become champions as we rolled out further. One thing that possibly didn't go so well is that we did all of this at the same time. So we were trying to kind of get each part of the platform ready and release in one go. And in hindsight, it probably would have been better to focus on one section at a time, make sure every department was comfortable and ready with that piece, and then move on to another section, rather than trying to do this like big bang, all shiny, flashy release all in one go. With the benefit of looking back at the late nights and early mornings and pure chaos that became several months, definitely would have been a better way to manage it, to focus on one piece of the puzzle at a time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I suppose that goes back to kind of how we operate as a business as well, and being agile, and the ability it allows you to do that, to put it out there, test it, get feedback, do it again, keep making it better. So yeah, that makes absolute sense. Okay, so Kirsty, finally over to you as well. So biggest professional change for you, and what went well, what didn't go so well? How did you navigate that?
Yeah, of course. Most of the changes that have happened in my career have been self-driven. So I've basically pushed for them rather than like being pushed upon, just because I think I probably tend to get a little bit bored sometimes. So all the changes that I've made, one of them though was an opportunity that my husband got given with his company to move to Texas. So I was currently unhappy with my role. I just moved, actually. I'd only been there a year, and it basically wasn't anything like what I'd been sold by the recruitment person. So it was kind of a perfect opportunity to kind of revamp my career almost, in terms of doing something completely different. And I'd never worked on like the client side, so like the buy side. So when I moved to Texas, and also I'd never worked in a smaller firm before. So when I moved, I looked for very specific small companies, more like the client private wealth aspect. And that was a huge change. So although it was self-driven, I still went through that change curve in terms of all the different feelings, like the shock of being in a teeny tiny firm, like it literally was just me, versus like all these thousands of people that you're kind of in different teams with. And so that was a huge shock to the system. And to be honest with you, it was, like I said, it was a struggle because I was the only one. So nothing really existed. There was no operations, there was no finance, there was nothing really there to work with. But then after time, you kind of adapt, you change, you then work through what you need to kind of adjust. But what it taught me is that actually I do need to work with people. It was definitely a lonely time, like working just on my own, basically, and also in a different country. Like it was a totally different place to, culturally, like although Americans speak the same language as us, it's very, very different. Obviously British are known for being their polite to manners, whereas when you're dealing with very high wealthy people, they sometimes don't appreciate that. But I think that's kind of what I took away from that, and I wouldn't have done anything differently. I think it was good for me to take myself out of my comfort zone and do something very different. But that's when I knew that I wanted something slightly larger, but also not too large. So, which is why specifically I was looking for Payment Sense size, and also to work within a team, so within a finance team, rather than just completely on my own. That's basically
Great. Okay, cool. No, that makes sense. And I like your point there around kind of change also doesn't have to come from other people in the workplace. It can be self-driven, and you still go through that same curve, those same responses and stuff. Okay, great. Thank you for that, Kirsty. Okay, so I also want to look at the personal ones as well. So I don't want to just keep it professional still. I want us to look at the personal side of stuff. So I suppose on the same note then, what about your personal changes? What's been the biggest personal changes for you guys? If we start with Daisy, do you want to take that one? What's the biggest personal changes that you've had, and if you don't mind sharing, and how have you managed it?
Yeah, of course. I think for me, all of my biggest personal changes have stemmed from moving or uprooting and going somewhere completely new, kind of similar to Kirsty's point. Yeah, if you leave behind everything that you know and is your comfort zone and go somewhere completely different where you don't necessarily have a support network yet or anything like that, that's quite a big change. And for me, I've done that a few times. Very similar to Kirsty, I get bored. And moving to Bristol was probably one of them. I didn't have anybody here. I kind of brought my partner on that journey with me and just sprung on him that I'd been offered the job in Bristol, and did he want to come too? I think the thing with personal change that I find different to professional is it's so much easier to get stuck in your own head, because it's kind of you driving that change for the most part, and it's sometimes harder to be pragmatic or take a step back and see the bigger picture. So I know for me, one of the biggest things in managing personal change is accepting what I can and can't influence, what is in my control and what is not, and kind of defining those things allows me to process the change much easier. I can't control certain things, and once I accepted that, it made it easier for me to focus on what I could do and could influence, and therefore make the whole change process much more successful. Because when it's a personal change, it's really easy to get caught up in the emotions that are surrounding that, and actually taking a step out of that view, kind of looking at it from above and going, okay, this is what I can do, rather than focusing on what I can't, has seen me through quite a few personal changes.
Yeah, you're right. It is about what can you influence, like you said. If you don't do that, you're going to struggle to get through it, because you're going to set these unrealistic expectations on yourself and just cause yourself more stress.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay, so on to you, Divya, then. So for you, Divya, what are the personal changes that you've gone through, or if you don't mind sharing as well, and kind of how have you navigated that as well?
Yeah, I think it's the same as Kirsty and Daisy. My biggest change, personal one, was when I moved to London. So, I mean, I had already lived in London for 1 year. I did Erasmus, which, for the ones who don't know what it is, it's just the 1 year study program that they give you to do it in a different country in Europe. So I did that. I did also do another course in San Francisco. So I had done those things before moving, but at least it was already like there was a time period and there was something given to you. Whereas when I decided to move to London for my career, it was really very, very scary. Firstly, because there was no return ticket. It was like, okay, let's see what's going to happen. I was quite young. It was a language barrier as well. It was the culture, everything. I still made the step. I took the step because, like Daisy said, like sometimes you're bored, you need to, like, you want to do something, and like you were saying in the session, Sheila, like life needs changes. Like changes is an essential part of life. Otherwise, you won't progress. Doesn't matter if it's professionally or personally. So yeah, I took that step. I came to London. It didn't really impact me until I arrived at London. I remember when I arrived at the airport and I took the train to London, and that's when I started crying on the train. Like, oh my God, what have I done? Is this a good decision? What if I made the wrong decision? And the first week I was kind of feeling low, just because of the uncertainty of, like, am I actually going to find what I came for? Like looking for a flat, looking for a job, looking for new friends. And then I spoke to my family, and, you know, like my dad was quite helpful. Like he basically helped me change my mind, you know, like be more positive. He said, like, look, you decide to make that change. So it must be because of something. It's because you wanted to. So now just do it. Be positive. What's the worst that can happen? Give yourself, I don't know, 3 months. If you don't find what you're looking for, then you just come back to Spain and think of it as a holiday. And that's what I did. And I changed my entire way of thinking, and I started applying for jobs, and I got my first job with Payment Sense, and it was good. I remember the first day as well in Payment Sense, when we had a meeting to introduce the team and to introduce myself. We were just sitting in the boardroom, all of us, and everyone was introducing themselves to me, and I remember just thinking, oh my God, this is unbelievable. I can't imagine I'm here right now. Everyone is talking to me in English. What is this? Oh, wow. and that was probably one of the biggest personal changes I went through in my life, and turned out to be quite positive change.
That's really amazing, and that's such a nice story to think, and so brave as well. And you're right, it's that positive mindset. If you reframe your mindset, you'll be in a better position to cope with any big changes. Sticking with you, Divya, actually, I want to just talk about obviously the fact that you have been in Payment Sense for a very long time, 8 years, like you said at the beginning. You've seen a lot of changes in the business. How, I suppose for everyone listening, like, how do you kind of manage change in Payment Sense? What do you think are kind of, how from your point of view, how can people better deal with the changes that we go through? Because we go through a lot of them, and people who haven't been in this kind of fast-paced environment before might struggle with it at first, or might find it hard to kind of get used to. So what would be your top tips for it?
So in Payment Sense, I've worked throughout different roles and departments. I started in operations, which was a team job, like working with a team. So it was kind of like really like fun to do. Then when I changed to another role, which was the asset controller role, I went for that role, and that was one of the biggest changes role-wise for me, because from working with a team to working just by myself alone, like Kirsty said, it was just me having to work, and also it was a whole new role in Payment Sense. So there was no handover, there was no training. I had to basically create the role, create the new processes, and try and prove myself. So tips that I would give to people who work in Payment Sense, like you said, Payment Sense is a very fast-paced company. There are changes happening constantly, and something very important is to be proactive. You have to be proactive in Payment Sense. They appreciate people who have a lot of ideas. They appreciate people who actually suggest things, come up with new processes. They love changes, they love improving processes and everything. So it is very important to be proactive, and something that I learned obviously in my role when I had to come up with a whole new process and everything. I had to literally be proactive. Another thing would be communication. Like, it is very important to communicate with every department, every person. Share with them your knowledge, take their knowledge for yourself to improve the processes, and for yourself and for the company, and always be prepared for multiple outcomes. When we go through changes, sometimes we just focus on one outcome, like this is what we want, this is the result, this is what we're gonna get. But if we make the change and we don't really get those results, then we can get stuck and then be like, okay, what now? And no, we need to be flexible and open-minded, and we need to definitely prepare for multiple outcomes.
Good. And you make a really good point there about learning from others as well. So actually making sure that we ask people what worked well, what didn't work well, what would you do differently next time, because you're going to learn so much from people by asking those 3 simple questions. Okay, cool. So Kirsty, you obviously started a few months ago, so 8 months ago, like you said, and you came in when finance were going through quite a transition phase. I think you and Divya have both sort of touched on it as well, around the fact that the new system was implemented, a lot of team changes, things like that. What do you think, from your own kind of point of view, what unites a team to get through a big change like that?
Yeah, I was trying to work out over the weekend how many people had come and gone from finance since I joined, and I think it's about 10, which is a crazy amount of attrition for a team. And like Divya said, Payment Sense, you can see how people don't get bored of Payment Sense, because literally daily things change, which is great, because at least it keeps everyone on their toes, and it is a fast-paced environment to work in. But from the team perspective, like, I couldn't reiterate it more, and I know it's on the change curve and we've all spoken about it, but in terms of the positivity and communication, like, seriously, it's really key. And especially towards the end of last year, and I was very new to the team, and you come in and it's almost chaotic, like nobody knows what's going on. I was joining a team a role that didn't exist before, so it was kind of a little bit chaotic, but it's almost trying to work out who's doing what and try and navigate through by just talking to each other. And even now this year, it's obviously we've had lots of changes as well, and it's going to keep changing as we obviously move to Jojo, but it's almost just about taking it as an opportunity. Like, all change is good. There's so many cringy sayings, but they're so true. It's like getting comfortable with discomfort. You know, communication is key, and just remaining positive, basically. Not taking anything personal, I think, was a key takeaway for me last year, because everybody had quite a short a short fuse, because everybody was working ridiculous hours, weekends and everything, and with all the changes, everybody was scared for their jobs. It was kind of a tough atmosphere to be in. But as a team, we got through it, because we made sure that even though we were all exhausted, we made sure that we still had like a few drinks after work, because at the end of the day, you still need to bond. And I'm so glad I joined when I did, because I think for people that are joining now in this environment, it's tough because it's all virtual, and it's just making sure that we're all staying in touch. Like, I make sure that even though I am kind of on my own, I still make sure that I'm part of the finance team, and touch base with everybody like every couple of days, just to kind of check in, see how it's going. We have our team meetings every week. It's just making sure that you don't have that negativity that can happen when change is going on. Just trying to manage that and make sure that it doesn't foster within a team. And that was kind of definitely key towards the end of last year, when it all got to a head, and kind of just but it's basically communicating all the time, making sure everyone's okay.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And you're right, negativity breeds negativity as well. So you have to have the highs of your team stuff, but then know when enough's enough as well, and kind of work out how do you remove that or address that as well with people. Good. Okay, so you talked there, Kirsty, around obviously people who are starting now, so that leads me nicely into my question for Daisy then. Daisy, obviously you said you've been here 3 months. You came in literally the week that we went into lockdown. So for you, primarily your job with us has been from afar and remotely. So you've seen changes already in the business. You've seen changes in the service team in Bristol. You've gone from coming in and doing face-to-face training, going fully online. Then you've also had the change in the roles. So you helped with business funding. Now you're going to SuperPay. So for you, what do you think have kind of been the biggest strengths, I suppose, of both the company and for you individually of kind of navigating all of that?
Yeah, it's been an interesting time to have a new job. I think, to be honest, it actually having a new job is always nerve-wracking, and you have that kind of like first day of school, new kid feeling always, I think. And actually lockdown and the pandemic alleviated quite a lot of that, because everybody was transitioning into a new way of working, whether you'd been here a week, 3 months, 5 years, 10 years, it doesn't matter. Everyone was kind of adjusting into a new way of working, and it kind of felt that made it easier to be the new person in an environment, because there was already this change in working patterns and changing behaviour and changing ways of communicating with people. It definitely helps that everyone at Payment Sense, everyone I've met has been so wonderful and so willing to help. And to Kirsty's point, everyone's done such a great job of keeping in touch. There's always something going on, or a way of connecting with each other, and that's certainly made it easier. In terms of strengths, I think understanding what my role has helped, or what my role has helped. Really taking the time to think about, why am I here? What have I been hired to do? Even in the changing priorities with business funding and SuperPay, and thinking about existing Payment Sense life, understanding who I am and where I fit in with kind of the wider business objectives has been a key to keeping me focused and not getting distracted by all the other things that are going on in the world. And a Payment Sense strength has definitely been allowing me the space to do that, to be creative in what I want to do in my new role. Keep educating me. Everyone has been so wonderful. It's my first time working in a financial environment. I come from an energy background predominantly, so there's a lot to learn. And everyone has been willing to help, not just with me, but with the whole Bristol team. Everyone that's come in is in the same boat. So yeah, I think working for a company where it's so clear that everyone wants to help and everyone's working towards the same goal has definitely helped. And for me, understanding how I fit into that has given me focus in a relatively chaotic time.
Brilliant. Okay, cool. So that leads quite nicely onto the next piece, actually. So obviously we looked at the model there around 8 steps to change, to major change. And we know that it can be chaotic. We know there can be a lot of frustrations and things like that. But what would each of you say, based on what we've looked at the change curve and the model, but what would you say would be your steps to kind of implementing change? Just if you could summarize it for us as to what you think are the biggest things that you've taken away or that you've learned over time as well. So Divya, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, of course. So there were 8 steps that you mentioned. I kind of compressed it into 4 steps. The first step would be to acknowledge and accept that you need a change, basically, which is when I was in Spain, I thought, I'm not happy. I need a change. And yeah, I cannot work here. I cannot carry on the life I've got. I just need a change. And that's when I acknowledged it and accepted it. Second one would be the communication and plan. So communication for me was basically letting my friends know, my family know, and with their opinion, when sometimes you need someone to encourage you to make a plan or to take a step. So yeah, communication and plan. Third one is basically actioning it. So implement the change, and that's when I quit my job. That was the plan, although spontaneously I decided to buy the flight tickets to London within a month. But yeah, so that is the implementation of the change. And then the fourth and the last step for me is that evaluating the progress of that change, and from that evaluation, deciding whether to continue that change or whether to leave it. So in my case, in my head, I gave myself 2 years of experience in London and then go back to Spain. But yeah, it's been 8 years now. Which is my evaluation and my result. I'm still happy. I'm still enjoying my life. So carrying on with this change and looking forward to more changes here.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's the whole moving forward stage, isn't it? Like we said. Okay, so same question to you, Daisy.
Yeah, similar to Divya, kind of condensed into 4 key things for me. So first is understanding the necessity behind the change. What is the why do we need to do it? What's going to be the benefit? Second step is to shape it and share it. So like Divya said, plan, have a roadmap of what you want to do and when, and share that, communicate it with everyone, bring everyone on that journey with you. Third one, to action and evaluate. So start making those changes, think about your short-term wins, and evaluate as you go with those. So many changes that I've seen in so many different places have kind of stuck so wholeheartedly to the original vision that it hasn't left room for progress through the actioning phase, and then you end up with people not being completely on board. And then the final one is to continually embed and grow and evolve that change, and constantly reevaluate what the purpose of it was in the first place. What was the vision? What was the mission statement? Is that still true? And continue to embed on the back of that.
Great, cool. Yeah, you're right. Be open to more change is crucial, right? Being able to evaluate, like you said, and just recognise whether that still applies, and if you need to change again and pivot again. Okay, so finally over to you, Kirsty. What would be your recommendations, your steps?
I think it goes back to what you said at the start about Cotter, that he says that it's meant to be constant, which is so true, especially at the moment with COVID and everything, everything is changing daily. So it's just becoming comfortable with that change. Change is good, change is an opportunity. And just, I mean, like I said at the start, I've always pushed for change, just because I think it's good, because I think when people get stale, that's when mistakes happen, and that's when things start to go wrong. So I think if you're always constantly questioning things, constantly changing things, I know it can be a little bit exhausting, so you kind of have to get that good balance between, you know, sometimes you just need to hold on a minute and just take stock of what's going on. Where are we going? So which is why I think the 8 steps is great in terms of, because it gives you that structure, so that you're not constantly like going on to the next thing, or to the next thing, or to the next thing. You're just like, actually, you have a plan rather than right, let's go book flights to somewhere.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you're right as well. Like, you do have a moment where you have to stop. There's this whole other category around change fatigue that you can talk about as well, and how it can become too tiring. But we won't go into that today. But yeah, absolutely. You have to be, it's the norm. Change is going to happen constantly now. It's what we have to get used to now. So we need to almost do away with kind of segmenting it and actually just think about how do we embed it in everything that we do. Okay, so that's starting to bring us up to the end of the session now. So if you guys have any questions, by all means, please do pop them into the chat box. I'm just going to show you a couple of resources, like I always do, of places that you can learn more about this if you're interested in the topic. There's a really good website called MindTools. I don't know if any of you have ever used it or been on there at all. There's a particular segment on change management, which is excellent. It's got all the processes, it's got different frameworks to how to do it, it's got tips and tricks and templates and all sorts on there. So it's a really great website if you're ever looking for processes and things that you can do and implement. The model that I talked about, John Cotter's model, he writes about it in detail in Leading Change. It's an excellent book if you haven't read it. Really, really not that long either, really easy to read, and he breaks down each of those 8 steps and goes into a lot more detail. And as always, you've got LinkedIn Learning Access. So there's a really good learning path on there called Manage Change and Develop Your Adaptability Skills. There's hundreds of them on there for change, but that one in particular I've done, and I thought that was excellent. It says 5 hours on there. You don't have to do everything on it. It has all the modules and the videos on there, so you can go in and digest whatever part of it you're interested in. Special thanks to our panelists today, to Divya, Daisy and Kirsty. It's been a really good conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and even your personal ones as well. It's really nice to see. Next week, it will be a session hosted by Chris Hatfield, our Sales Enablement Manager, and he's going to be talking about the importance of self-awareness. So hopefully you all managed to log on to that. I'll send out the link after this with the recording for next week's session as well. But on that note, should we just bring everyone back onto the camera and just say bye to everyone? If you've got any questions for anyone, by all means, let us know. And I hope you've enjoyed the session. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Divya. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.